The stagecoach lurched to a halt outside the Fort Laramie trading post, and Kellan Pierce knew something was wrong the moment he saw the driver's face. He had been waiting 3 weeks for this delivery, not of goods or supplies, but of a woman he had never met, a mail-order bride whose letters had convinced him that loneliness was not a permanent condition of frontier life. The driver climbed down slowly, dust coating his weathered face, and walked around to open the passenger door with unusual care. "Mr. Pierce," the driver called out, his voice carrying across the Wyoming afternoon. "Got your lady here, but there is something you should know." Kellan stepped forward, his boots crunching on the dry earth. He was 26 years old, tall and lean from years of breaking horses and working cattle, his dark hair always slightly too long because the nearest barber was 50 miles away. He had built a decent spread outside Fort Laramie, 300 acres with a sturdy house and a barn that did not leak. He had everything except someone to share it with. A woman appeared in the doorway of the stagecoach. She was younger than he expected, perhaps 22 or 23, with long dark hair that fell past her shoulders, and a face that would have stopped him in his tracks under any circumstances. She wore a simple blue traveling dress, now wrinkled from the journey, and she held herself with a peculiar stillness. "Miss Keller," Kellan said, removing his hat. "I'm Kellan Pierce. Welcome to Fort Laramie." She turned toward his voice, but her eyes did not quite meet his. "Mr. Pierce," she said softly. "I'm Zara Keller. I appreciate you coming to meet me." The driver cleared his throat. "Mr. Pierce, I think there has been some kind of misunderstanding. Miss Keller here, well, she cannot see. The folks who arranged this, they should have told you." Kellan felt the words settle over him like snow. He looked at Zara, really looked at her, and saw the way she held her head tilted slightly, listening. The way her hands gripped the edge of the coach door, not from fear but from need to know where she was in space. "I'm blind, sir," Zara said, her voice steady despite the tremor Kellan could hear beneath it. "They forgot to tell you. If you want to send me back, I understand. I have enough money for the return fare." She stood there in the doorway of the stagecoach, her chin lifted with dignity despite the obvious fear that she would be rejected, sent back across 1,000 miles of prairie to whatever life she had left behind. Kellan had spent 3 weeks imagining this moment, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of her. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was something in the set of her shoulders, the way she refused to collapse under the weight of this revelation. He stepped closer to the stagecoach, close enough that she would hear him clearly. "Then feel my heart instead," he said. Zara's expression shifted, confusion replacing the careful blankness. "What? If you cannot see me, then maybe you can feel who I am," Kellan said. He reached out and took her hand gently, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he placed her palm against his chest over his heart. "I'm not sending you back, not unless you want to go." Her hand was small against his shirt, and he could feel it trembling slightly. Through the fabric, she would be able to feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. He did not know what made him say such a thing or do such a thing. The words had simply come, as if his heart had spoken before his head could object. "You don't know me," Zara whispered. "You thought you were getting someone who could help run a household, who could see to things. I can do some things, I promise I can, but I will need help. I will be a burden." "Everyone needs help with something," Kellan said. "I need help remembering to eat regular meals when I get busy with work. I need help sewing buttons back on my shirts because I am terrible at it. I need help remembering that a house is supposed to be a home, not just a place to sleep between sunup and sundown." The driver was watching this exchange with open curiosity, as were several townspeople who had gathered to see the arrival of Fort Laramie's newest resident. Kellan was aware of them, but he kept his attention on Zara, on the way her fingers curled slightly against his chest, as if she were trying to read his honesty through his heartbeat. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You could write to the agency, ask for someone else." "Could," Kellan acknowledged. "But I have been reading your letters for 4 months now. You told me about growing up in Philadelphia, about loving the sound of rain on windows, about losing your sight to scarlet fever when you were 14. You told me you wanted to feel useful again, wanted to be somewhere where people did not treat you like you were made of glass. Those letters were from you, were they not?" "Yes," Zara said. "Then you are the person I have been writing to. You are the person who made me laugh when you described trying to teach yourself to cook by taste and smell and burning an entire pot of beans to cinders. You are the person who said you thought the frontier sounded like freedom." He paused. "Unless you do not want this anymore, that's different. But if the only thing stopping you is thinking I will be disappointed, then you are wrong." Zara's hand remained on his chest for another long moment, and then slowly, carefully, she smiled. It transformed her face, bringing light to it that had nothing to do with sight. "I want this," she said. "I want to try." The driver helped Zara down from the stagecoach, and Kellan kept a hand at her elbow, guiding her to solid ground. She had 2 trunks, which Kellan loaded onto his wagon while Zara stood nearby, her head turning slightly as she listened to the sounds of Fort Laramie around her. The trading post, the distant sound of the blacksmith's hammer, voices calling greetings, the creak of wagon wheels. "It is noisy," she said, sounding pleased. "Fort is a trading hub," Kellan explained. "Gets folks coming through from all over. Trappers, traders, cavalry from the post, emigrants heading to Oregon or California. It quiets down in winter, but summer is busy." He finished securing her trunks and came to stand beside her. "My place is about 5 miles out. Are you all right riding in a wagon, or would you prefer the stagecoach to take you somewhere in town first? There is a hotel if you want time to settle yourself." "I want to see your home," Zara said, and then she laughed, a sound with an edge of bitterness. "That is, I want you to show me your home. I am still getting used to adjusting my words." "You do not have to adjust anything for me," Kellan said. He helped her up onto the wagon seat, making sure she was steady before he climbed up beside her. The seat was narrow enough that they sat close together, their arms nearly touching. He picked up the reins, and the 2 horses started forward, pulling the wagon onto the rutted road that led out of Fort Laramie. The afternoon sun beat down warm on their shoulders, and the prairie stretched out in all directions, golden and green under the vast Wyoming sky. Kellan had traveled this road so many times he could do it in his sleep, but now he tried to see it as Zara might experience it. The creak of the wagon, the sound of the horses' hooves, the wind moving through the grass with a sound like rushing water. "Tell me what you see," Zara said after they had gone about a mile. Kellan glanced at her. She was holding onto the edge of the seat, her body swaying slightly with the motion of the wagon, her face turned forward as if she were looking out at the landscape. "Prairie," he said. "Grass as far as you can see, about knee-high right now because we had good rain in the spring. It is gold and green, and when the wind blows it moves in waves. There are wildflowers mixed in, purple and yellow. The sky is so big out here it feels like it could swallow you whole. Bright blue today, with a few clouds way off to the west. Mountains in the distance, the Laramie Range, still have snow on the peaks even though it is July." "I remember mountains," Zara said softly. "My parents took me to see the mountains in New York before I got sick. I remember how they looked purple when they were far away. These do that too, especially at sunset. Purple and pink and gold all mixed together." Kellan paused. "There is a creek that runs through my property. You can hear it from the house. I thought maybe that would be a good landmark for you, something to help you know where you are." "You have been thinking about this," Zara said. "About how I would manage." "Some," Kellan admitted. "I do not know much about blindness, but I figured you probably have ways of doing things and I can learn them." They rode in silence for a while, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. Kellan found himself very aware of her beside him, the way she held herself, the concentration on her face as she listened to everything around them. When an antelope burst from the grass and bounded away across the prairie, she turned her head to follow the sound. "What was that?" she asked. "Antelope." Startled by the wagon, they are fast, beautiful animals, brown and white with horns that curve back. He watched the antelope disappear over a rise. "There is all kinds of wildlife out here. Deer, elk, sometimes buffalo, though they are getting scarcer. Prairie dogs that dig towns underground and bark at everything that passes." "Prairie dogs," Zara laughed. "That sounds made up." "I promise they are real. Little animals about this big." He held his hands apart, then remembered she could not see the gesture. "About a foot long, maybe. They stand up on their back legs and make this yipping sound. I will take you to see to hear them, I mean, once you are settled." The house came into view after another mile, sitting in a shallow valley with the creek running behind it. It was a solid structure, built from logs Kellan had hauled and shaped himself, with a stone chimney and real glass windows that had cost him a small fortune to freight in from the east. There was a barn, a chicken coop, a corral with 3 horses watching their approach with pricked ears. Kellan pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "We are here," he said. He climbed down and came around to Zara's side, offering his hand. She took it and let him help her down, and then she stood very still, her head turning slightly as she oriented herself. "I hear water," she said. "The creek. It is about 50 yards behind the house. I built close to it for the water supply." He kept her hand in his, not sure if he should let go or not. "There are 3 steps up to the porch, then the front door. The inside is one main room with the kitchen and living area, and 2 bedrooms off to the side. It is not fancy, but it is solid." "It sounds wonderful," Zara said. Kellan led her slowly up the steps, describing each one as they went. The porch creaked under their weight, a friendly sound. He opened the door and guided her inside, into the dimmer interior. The main room smelled like wood smoke and coffee, and the leather of the saddle he had been repairing last night. Sunlight slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. "Kitchen area is to the left," Kellan said. "I have a table with 4 chairs, a stove, shelves with supplies. The living area is straight ahead, a fireplace, 2 chairs, a rug that is probably older than both of us combined. Bedrooms are to the right." He watched Zara take this in, her face intent with concentration. She let go of his hand and reached out carefully, finding the back of a chair, the edge of the table. Her fingers moved lightly over the surfaces, learning them. "I will need time to learn where everything is," she said. "I will probably bump into things for a while. I apologize in advance." "You do not need to apologize." Kellan set his hat on the table. "I was thinking for tonight you should take the main bedroom. It is bigger and it has the better bed. I can sleep in the other room." Zara turned toward him. "Mr. Pierce, I do not expect you to give up your bed. This is your home." "It is our home now," Kellan said. "And please call me Kellan. Mr. Pierce makes me feel like I should be acting more respectable than I am." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Then you should call me Zara." "Zara," he repeated and liked the way it sounded. He showed her through the house room by room, letting her touch everything, learn the layout. The main bedroom had a large bed with a quilt his mother had made before she passed, a wardrobe, a washstand with a basin and pitcher. The smaller bedroom, which Kellan had been using as a combination office and occasional sleeping space when he came in too tired to care about comfort, had a narrow cot and a desk piled with papers. "This is where you have been sleeping?" Zara asked, standing in the doorway of the small room. "Lately, yes. I tend to fall asleep working on the books. That cannot be good for your back." "Probably not," Kellan agreed. They returned to the main room, and Kellan set about making coffee while Zara sat at the table, her hands folded in front of her. He was very aware of her watching him, or rather, listening to him move around the kitchen. He pumped water into the kettle, set it on the stove, measured out coffee grounds. "I can cook," Zara said suddenly. "I know you might not believe me, but I can. I learned after I lost my sight. It took time, but I can do it. I can clean too, and I can sew, though I need good light for that so I can feel the shadows of my fingers." "I believe you," Kellan said. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "Zara, I want you to understand something. I did not ask you to come here so I could have a housekeeper. I asked you to come here because I have been alone for a long time, and I thought maybe we could build something together. A partnership. A life. You asked me to come here because you thought I could see," Zara said quietly. "I asked you to come here because of your letters, because you sounded like someone I wanted to know." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Yes, I did not know about your blindness, but I do not see how that changes who you are." "It changes everything," Zara said. "It makes me dependent." "It makes me less." "No," Kellan said firmly. "It makes you someone who has learned to live differently. That is not less. That is just different." Zara's expression was caught between hope and disbelief. "You say that now, but when you realize how much help I need, when you get tired of having to explain everything and guide me everywhere, then I will deal with it then," Kellan interrupted. "But I do not think I will get tired of it. Zara, I spent last winter alone in this house for days at a time when the snow was too deep to get to town. I talked to my horses more than I talked to people. You being here, even if you need help with things, is not a burden. It is a gift." The kettle began to whistle, and Kellan got up to pour the coffee. He found 2 cups, filled them both, brought them to the table. "Careful, it is hot," he said, placing one in front of her. "The cup is about 6 inches in front of you, just to the right of your hand." Zara reached out and found the cup, curling her fingers around it carefully. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping coffee. Outside, one of the horses whinnied and the chickens made their soft, clucking sounds. The creek babbled in the background, a constant music. "What happens now?" Zara asked finally. "Do we get married right away, or do you want time to make sure you truly want to do this?" Kellan had been thinking about this on the ride from town. "I think we should take time to get to know each other in person. The letters were a start, but this is different, real. I do not want you to feel rushed into anything, and I want you to be sure this is what you want." "And if I decide it is not?" Zara asked. "If I decide I want to go back?" "Then I will buy you a ticket back to Philadelphia and make sure you have money to start over." Kellan said it even though the thought of her leaving already made something in his chest tighten. "But I hope you will give this a chance. Give us a chance." Zara nodded slowly. "I will give it a chance, but Kellan, you have to promise me something." "What is that?" "Promise me you will be honest if this becomes too difficult. I do not want you to stay with me out of obligation or pity. I have had enough of that in my life." "I promise," Kellan said. "And you have to promise me the same thing. If you are unhappy, if this is not what you wanted, you will tell me." "I promise," Zara said. They spent the rest of the afternoon getting Zara settled. Kellan brought her trunks in and helped her unpack, describing where he was putting things so she could find them later. She had brought practical clothes, several dresses in sturdy fabrics, a warm coat for winter, and a surprising number of books. "I cannot read them anymore," Zara said when Kellan commented on the books, but I could not bear to leave them behind. They were my favorite thing before I got sick. I used to read all the time. Kellan picked up one of the books, a worn copy of Jane Eyre. I could read to you, he offered. In the evenings, maybe, after the work is done. Zara's face lit up. You would do that. I like reading. Do not get much chance to do it, but I like it. He set the book on the shelf he had built into the wall. My mother used to read to me when I was a boy. I remember her reading Ivanhoe and some Dickens, and every now and then she would get her hands on a newspaper from back east and we would read it cover to cover. Your mother sounds like she was wonderful. She was. She died when I was 19. Fever took her one winter. My father died a few years before that, accident with a horse. Kellan arranged the rest of the books on the shelf. It was hard losing them both, but they taught me how to work hard and how to treat people right. That is a good legacy. They made dinner together, Kellan describing where everything was in the kitchen while Zara insisted on helping. She moved slowly, carefully, but she was competent. She could dice vegetables by feel, could test the heat of the stove with her hand held above it, could season food by smell. They made a simple stew with beef and potatoes and carrots, and it was better than anything Kellan had cooked for himself in months. You were not lying about being able to cook, he said as they ate. I told you, Zara said, sounding pleased. My aunt in Philadelphia, the one I was living with, she insisted I learn. She said I needed to be able to take care of myself. She was not always kind about it, but she was right. You were living with your aunt. What about your parents? Zara's expression shuddered slightly. They died. About a year after I lost my sight. A carriage accident. My aunt took me in because she felt obligated, but she made it clear I was a burden. When I saw the advertisement for mail-order brides, I thought it was a chance to start over somewhere new, where nobody knew me as the poor blind Keller girl. Kellan reached across the table and covered her hand with his. You are not a burden, not to me. Her fingers turned under his, curling around his hand. You keep saying that. I am starting to think you might mean it. I do mean it. After dinner, they sat outside on the porch, watching the sun set over the prairie. Kellan described the colors to Zara, the way the sky turned from blue to purple to pink to orange, the way the light made the grass look like it was on fire. She listened with her face turned toward the west, a small smile on her lips. I remember sunsets, she said. Not what they look like, not really, but the feeling of them, the way everything gets quiet and soft. That is a good way to describe it, Kellan said. The stars came out, filling the sky with light. Kellan pointed out constellations, describing their shapes, telling Zara the stories behind them. She leaned against the porch rail, her head tilted back, and Kellan found himself watching her more than the stars. In the starlight, she looked ethereal, almost unreal. I am glad I came, Zara said softly. Even if I was terrified, even if I thought you might send me right back, I'm glad I took the chance. So am I, Kellan said, and he meant it with everything in him. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Kellan woke early to tend the animals and do the heavy work while the morning was still cool, and Zara learned the house and the immediate area around it. He watched her map everything in her mind, counting steps, memorizing distances, finding landmarks by sound and feel. She was determined to be independent, sometimes frustratingly so. She burned herself on the stove and did not tell him until he noticed the blister. She tripped over a stump in the yard and scraped her knee, then tried to insist she was fine. You do not have to do everything yourself, Kellan said, cleaning the scrape with water from the creek. It is all right to ask for help. I've been asking for help my whole life since I lost my sight, Zara said, her voice tight. I want to manage on my own. Pride is going to get you hurt, Kellan said, but he said it gently. How about we make a deal? You ask for help when you need it, and I will trust you to know your own limits. That way neither of us has to worry so much." Zara considered this, then nodded. "That is fair." He taught her the sounds of his land. The different calls of the birds, the way the horses had different whinnies, the sound of the prairie wind versus the sound of a storm coming. She taught him to be more aware of the details he had stopped noticing, the way the house settled at night, the smell of rain on dry earth, the texture of different fabrics. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps that letters had left. Kellan told her about learning to break horses from his father, about the first time he had been thrown and broken his arm, about building this house with his own hands over the course of 2 years. Zara told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, about her father who had been a banker and her mother who had played piano, about the fever that had burned through her like fire and stolen her sight. "I was terrified," she said one evening as they sat on the porch. "I woke up and everything was dark, and I thought I was still asleep, still in the fever dreams. It took days before I accepted that the darkness was not going away." "I cannot imagine that," Kellan said. "The worst part was how people changed," Zara continued. "My friends stopped visiting. People talked about me like I was not there, or they spoke to me like I was a child. My aunt treated me like I was made of glass, but also like I was stupid because I could not see. That is part of why I wanted to leave. I wanted to be somewhere where I could just be a person again, not the blind girl." "You are a person," Kellan said. "A brave, stubborn, wonderful person." Zara turned toward him, and even though her eyes did not meet his, he felt the weight of her attention. "You really think that? I know it." They had been at the ranch for 2 weeks when the first real test came. Kellan needed to ride out to check on the cattle that grazed in the far pasture, a trip that would take most of the day. He did not want to leave Zara alone, but he also knew he could not coddle her. "I will be fine," Zara said when he expressed his concern. "I know the house, I know the yard, I will stay close and I will be careful." "There is a rifle by the door," Kellan said. "I know you cannot see to shoot, but you can fire it in the air if you need help. The Daltons have a ranch about 3 miles west. They would hear it and come." "I will be fine," Zara repeated. "Kellan, you cannot stay with me every moment. I need to prove to myself that I can manage." He knew she was right, but it did not make leaving any easier. He saddled his horse, a reliable mare named Juniper, and gave Zara a list of where everything was one more time. She shooed him away with a laugh. "Go. The cattle need you. I will be here when you get back, and I promise I will not burn the house down." Kellan rode out with a knot of worry in his stomach that did not ease until he was too far away to turn back without wasting the whole day. He checked the cattle, counted heads, looked for signs of disease or injury. Everything was fine. The herd was healthy, the grass was good, the water was plentiful. It should have made him feel better, but all he could think about was Zara alone at the house. He made the ride back in record time, pushing Juniper harder than he should have. The house came into view as the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, and Kellan felt his chest loosen when he saw smoke coming from the chimney. He dismounted and practically ran to the door. Zara was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. She turned when she heard him come in, and she was smiling. "You are back," she said. "I made chicken and dumplings. I hope you are hungry." Kellan crossed the room and pulled her into his arms without thinking. She made a small sound of surprise, but then her arms came around him, holding him just as tightly. "I was worried," he said into her hair. "I was fine," she said, but her voice was soft and she did not pull away. "But I am glad you are back. The house is too quiet without you." They stood there in the kitchen for a long moment, holding each other, and Kellan felt something shift in his chest. This was more than companionship, more than partnership. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, he had started falling in love with her. With her courage and her determination, with the way she laughed at herself when she made mistakes, with the softness she tried to hide behind her stubborn independence, he pulled back just enough to look down at her. "Zara," he said. She tilted her face up toward his. "Yes." He almost said it then, almost told her what he was feeling. But it seemed too soon, too fast. Instead he said, "Thank you for dinner. It smells amazing." Something flickered across her face, a hint of disappointment maybe, but she smiled. "You are welcome. Now go wash up, it is almost ready." That night they sat outside again, and Kellan read to her from Jane Eyre. His voice carried over the prairie sounds, over the creek and the wind, and Zara sat with her eyes closed, a smile on her face. When he reached the part where Rochester tells Jane that he loves her, Kellan's voice faltered slightly. Zara opened her eyes, turned toward him. "Keep going," she said softly. He kept going, but the words felt weighted, felt like they were about more than just the story. A few days later, a storm rolled in from the west. Kellan saw it coming from miles away, a dark wall of clouds that turned the sky green. He hurried to secure everything outside, bringing the horses into the barn, closing the shutters on the windows. "What is happening?" Zara asked from the porch. "Storm," Kellan said shortly. "A bad one. We need to get inside." The wind hit just as they made it through the door, a howling force that shook the house. Rain followed, drumming on the roof like bullets. Lightning flashed, bright enough that Kellan could see it even through the closed shutters, and thunder cracked so loud it felt like the sky was breaking open. Zara stood in the middle of the room, her face pale. "Kellan," he went to her, took her hands. "It is all right. The house is solid, it has weathered storms worse than this." "I cannot see the lightning," Zara said. "I can hear the thunder, but I cannot prepare for it." Kellan understood immediately. Without sight, the thunder would seem to come from nowhere, unpredictable and terrifying. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "I have got you," he said. "Every time the lightning flashes, I will tell you. Then you can count until the thunder comes." He did exactly that. For the next hour, as the storm raged outside, Kellan described each flash of lightning, and Zara counted the seconds until the thunder rolled over them. Gradually, as the storm moved on, the seconds grew longer, the thunder more distant. "It is passing," Kellan said. "The worst is over." Zara had her face pressed against his chest, her arms tight around him. "I was not this afraid of storms before," she said, her voice muffled. "But now, when I cannot see them, they feel so much bigger." "I will be here for the next one," Kellan promised, "and the one after that. Every storm, I will be here." She looked up at him then, her face close to his, and Kellan felt his breath catch. He could see the tracks of tears on her cheeks, could see the way her lips were parted slightly. Without thinking, without planning, he leaned down and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, giving her time to pull away. But she did not pull away. Instead, she rose up on her toes and kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt. The kiss deepened, became something more, something that spoke of fear and comfort and the beginning of love. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zara said, "I was wondering if you were ever going to do that." Kellan laughed, surprised. "You were wondering?" "I have wanted you to kiss me for days," Zara said, "but I could not tell if you wanted to or if you were just being kind." "I have wanted to kiss you since that first day," Kellan admitted, "when you put your hand on my heart, but I did not want to rush you." "Then stop worrying about rushing me," Zara said, and she pulled him down for another kiss. The storm outside had passed, but inside the house, something new had begun. They kissed until they were both dizzy with it, until Kellan had to pull away or risk taking things too far too fast. Zara protested the loss of contact, making him laugh. "We have time," he said, brushing his thumb over her lower lip. "All the time in the world." "I do not want to wait," Zara said. "Kellan, I have been alone for so long. I have felt like half a person, like something was missing, but here with you I feel whole again." "You were always whole," Kellan said. "You just needed someone who could see it." "Then see me," Zara said, and there was a challenge in her voice and a vulnerability that made Kellan's heart ache. "See all of me and tell me you still want this." "I see you," Kellan said. "I see your strength and your courage. I see the way you refuse to let your blindness define you. I see the kindness in you and the humor and the way you have more bravery in your little finger than most men have in their whole bodies. And yes, Zara, I still want this. I want you. I want us." She kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear. There was only certainty. They talked late into the night, curled together on the old sofa near the fireplace. They talked about what they wanted from life, from each other. Kellan told her he wanted a family, children to fill the house with noise and laughter. Zara said she wanted that too, but she was afraid. "What if I cannot take care of a child?" she asked. "What if my blindness makes me a bad mother?" "You will be a wonderful mother," Kellan said with absolute conviction. "You are patient and kind and strong. A child does not need a mother who can see. A child needs a mother who loves them." "You have so much faith in me," Zara said wonderingly, "because you deserve it." They decided to get married as soon as possible. There was no point in waiting, not when they both knew what they wanted. Kellan rode into Fort Laramie the next morning and spoke to the circuit preacher who passed through every few weeks. As luck would have it, Preacher Morrison was in town and agreed to come out to the ranch the following Sunday to perform the ceremony. Kellan also stopped at the trading post and bought fabric for a new dress for Zara. He chose a deep green that reminded him of the pines in the mountains, soft cotton that would drape well. He had no idea if Zara would like it, but the woman at the trading post assured him it was beautiful. When he got home and gave Zara the fabric, she ran her hands over it, feeling the texture, and then she smiled so wide it took his breath away. "It is perfect," she said. "Will you tell me what color it is?" "Green, like the pine trees. I thought it would look beautiful with your dark hair." "I cannot wait to wear it," Zara said, and then she laughed. "I cannot believe I am getting married. A few months ago I thought I would spend the rest of my life in my aunt's house, unwanted and alone." "You are wanted," Kellan said fiercely, "and you will never be alone again." Zara spent the next few days sewing her wedding dress. She worked by feel and by the light that helped her see the shadows of her hands, and Kellan watched in amazement as the dress took shape. It was simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a fitted bodice. She made him promise not to see it until the wedding day. "It is bad luck," she said when he protested. "You do not even believe in bad luck," Kellan pointed out. "Maybe not, but I want this to be special. Let me have this one tradition." He let her have it, though it was hard not to peek. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine. Preacher Morrison rode up in the morning, along with two neighbors Kellan had invited to serve as witnesses. The Daltons, an older couple who had been kind to Kellan since he had settled in the area, brought a basket of food for a small celebration after the ceremony. Zara emerged from the bedroom wearing the green dress, and Kellan forgot how to breathe. She had braided her hair and wound it around her head like a crown, and she carried a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked for her that morning. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "You look perfect," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me about you," Zara said. "What are you wearing?" "My best shirt, which I actually ironed for once. Dark pants, my good boots that do not have any mud on them. I even shaved this morning." Zara laughed. "I wish I could see you, but I can imagine, and I am sure you are very handsome. Not as beautiful as you." The ceremony was simple and short, but every word felt weighted with meaning. When Preacher Morrison asked Kellan if he took Zara to be his wife, Kellan said yes without hesitation. When he asked Zara the same question, her voice was clear and strong. "I do." "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said, and Kellan did, putting everything he felt into that kiss. Love and promise and forever. Mrs. Dalton was crying by the time they broke apart. "That was the most beautiful ceremony I have ever seen," she said, dabbing at her eyes. They celebrated with the food the Daltons had brought, simple fare but delicious. Cake with honey frosting, cold chicken, fresh bread, berries from Mrs. Dalton's garden. They ate on the porch, and Kellan described the afternoon light to Zara, the way it turned everything golden. "This is the happiest day of my life," Zara said, her hand in Kellan's. "Mine too," Kellan said, and he meant it. The Daltons and Preacher Morrison left in the late afternoon, and Kellan and Zara were alone for the first time as husband and wife. They stood on the porch, listening to the sounds of the prairie settling into evening, and Kellan felt a contentment he had never known. "Are you nervous?" he asked Zara. "A little," she admitted. "But mostly I am excited. I love you, Kellan." "I have loved you for weeks now, but I was afraid to say it." "I love you too," Kellan said, the words feeling right and true. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you put your hand on my heart and trusted me." That night, they came together with tenderness and care, learning each other in the darkness that was the same for both of them. Kellan told Zara she was beautiful until she believed it, and Zara showed Kellan that love did not need sight, it only needed an open heart. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Kellan's life. The ranch work continued, and Zara became more and more capable around the homestead. She learned to find her way to the barn, to the chicken coop, even down to the creek. She started a small garden near the house, growing vegetables and herbs by feel and smell. Kellan built raised beds for her so she would not have to bend so far, and marked them with different textures of wood so she could tell them apart. They developed a routine that worked for both of them. Kellan would rise early to do the heavy work, and Zara would make breakfast, the smell of bacon and coffee drawing him back to the house. They would eat together, talking about the day ahead, and then Kellan would head out to work while Zara tended to the house and garden. In the evenings, they would sit together and Kellan would read to her, or they would just talk, sharing the small details of their days. Winter came, bringing snow that piled high around the house and cold that made the windows frost over. Kellan worried about Zara being trapped inside, but she seemed to love the winter. She said the snow muffled sound in a way that made everything feel peaceful, and she loved the warmth of the fire after the cold outside. "I feel safer in winter," she said one evening as they sat by the fire. "The landmarks do not change when everything is covered in snow. I know exactly how many steps from the porch to the barn, and that does not shift." "I never thought of it that way," Kellan said. They spent the long winter evenings working on projects together. Kellan repaired tack and tools while Zara knitted socks and scarves. She was teaching herself to knit by feel, and while her first attempts were lumpy and uneven, by midwinter she was producing work that was nearly perfect. "My aunt would be shocked," Zara said, holding up a pair of socks she had just finished. "She always said I would never be able to do anything useful." "Your aunt was wrong about a lot of things," Kellan said. In February, Zara started feeling ill in the mornings. At first she thought it was something she had eaten, but when it continued for a week, she began to suspect the truth. She told Kellan one night after dinner, her hands twisting in her lap. "I think I might be pregnant," she said. Kellan stared at her, his mind trying to catch up with his heart. "Really? I am not certain, but the signs are there. I am late and I have been sick every morning and my breasts are tender." She paused. "Are you happy about this?" Kellan crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Happy, Zara, I am thrilled." terrified but thrilled. "I am terrified too," Zara admitted. "What if I cannot do this? What if I cannot take care of a baby when I cannot see?" "You will do it the same way you do everything else," Kellan said, "with courage and determination and more strength than anyone I have ever known. And I will be here to help. We will figure it out together." Zara's eyes filled with tears and she pulled Kellan up so she could kiss him. "I love you so much," she said against his lips. "I love you too, both of you." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "All of us." The pregnancy progressed and Zara bloomed with it. Her skin glowed, her smile came easier, and despite the morning sickness that plagued her for the first few months, she seemed happier than ever. Kellan found himself constantly amazed by her. She continued to manage the household, adapting to her changing body with the same determination she brought to everything. When she started to show, Kellan would rest his hand on her belly in the evenings, feeling for the baby's movements. The first time he felt a kick, he shouted with joy, making Zara laugh. "The baby is active," she said. "I felt the first movements a few weeks ago like butterflies inside me." "What does it feel like now?" Kellan asked. "Stronger, like someone is tapping on the inside, saying hello." She placed her hand over his. "Sometimes I wish I could see what I look like. Is it obvious I am pregnant?" "Very obvious," Kellan said. "You look beautiful. Your belly is round and perfect, and you have this glow about you. You look like the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "You always say I am beautiful," Zara said, but she was smiling. "Because it is always true." They made preparations for the baby's arrival. Kellan built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth so there would be no splinters. Zara sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her fingers moving surely over the fabric. Mrs. Dalton visited often, bringing advice and hand-me-down baby items from when her own children were small. "You know how you will manage?" Mrs. Dalton asked one afternoon, her voice carefully neutral. Zara smiled. "The same way I manage everything else, by adapting. I have been thinking about it a lot. I will learn the baby's cries, what each one means. I will learn the baby's smell, the feel of them. I will know my child in ways that seeing mothers might not." Mrs. Dalton looked at Kellan, and he saw respect in her eyes. "You are going to be a wonderful mother," she said to Zara. "I hope so," Zara said softly. The baby came in early October on a day when the aspens were turning gold on the mountainsides. Kellan had ridden to fetch Mrs. Dalton at dawn, when Zara's pains had started coming regularly, and he paced outside the bedroom door while the older woman helped Zara through the labor. It was the longest day of Kellan's life. He heard Zara cry out in pain, heard her sobbing, and wanted nothing more than to break down the door and make it stop. But Mrs. Dalton had been firm that he should stay out, and Zara had agreed, saying she did not want him to see her that way. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound. A baby's cry, thin and outraged. Kellan's legs nearly gave out with relief. Mrs. Dalton opened the door a few minutes later, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is asking for you." Kellan rushed into the room. Zara was propped up on pillows, her hair plastered to her head with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. "Kellan," she said, her voice hoarse, "come meet our son." He approached the bed carefully, as if sudden movement might shatter the moment. The baby was so small, red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair. Kellan reached out and touched one tiny hand, and the baby's fingers closed around his thumb with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Kellan said, his voice breaking. "Tell me what he looks like," Zara said. "I have been waiting to hear." Kellan sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes never leaving his son. "He has dark hair like yours, lots of it." His face is red from crying, but I can tell he is going to be handsome. He has your nose, I think, and your chin. His eyes are blue, but Mrs. Dalton says they might change. His hands are so small, Zara. I cannot believe something this small is a whole person." Zara was crying, tears streaming down her face. "Can I hold him closer? I want to learn him." Kellan helped her adjust the baby, and Zara ran her fingers gently over the infant's face. She traced his eyebrows, his nose, his tiny ears. She touched his hands and counted his fingers, touched his feet and counted his toes. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama. I cannot see you, but I love you more than anything in this world." The baby's crying quieted at the sound of her voice, and he turned his head toward her. Zara laughed, the sound filled with wonder. "He knows me," she said. "Kellan, he knows my voice." "Of course he does. He has been listening to it for months." They named the baby Kieran, a strong name for what Kellan hoped would be a strong man. The first few weeks were exhausting, with Kieran waking every few hours to eat, but Kellan had never been happier. He watched Zara learn to care for their son, watched her confidence grow as she figured out what each cry meant, how to soothe him, how to know when he needed to be changed or fed or just held. She was right that she learned him differently than a sighted mother might. She could tell by the sound of his breathing if he was truly asleep or just drowsing. She could feel the slightest change in his temperature that might signal illness. She knew the texture of his skin, the smell of him, the weight of him in her arms. "I was so afraid I would not be able to do this," Zara said one night as she rocked Kieran to sleep. "But it turns out I can. It is hard, but I can do it." "You are amazing," Kellan said, watching her from the doorway. "Both of you are." The years passed in a blur of work and love, and the steady growth of their family. Kieran grew from infant to toddler to little boy, full of energy and curiosity. He learned early that his mother could not see, and he adapted to it with the easy acceptance of children. He would describe things to her without being asked, would take her hand and lead her to things he wanted to show her. When Kieran was 3, Zara became pregnant again. This time she was less afraid, more confident. Their daughter, Carissa, was born in the spring, a tiny dark-haired baby who looked like a perfect copy of her mother. Kieran was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything. "Gentle," Zara would remind him. "She is very small." "I know, Mama," Kieran would say, his little hands careful on his sister's blanket. Life on the ranch was not always easy. There were harsh winters and dry summers, years when the cattle prices were low and money was tight. There were illnesses and injuries, the constant hard work that frontier life demanded. But through it all, Kellan and Zara held on to each other and their love. Zara's blindness was simply a part of their life, not a tragedy or a limitation. She ran the household with efficiency, raised her children with patience and love, and was Kellan's partner in every way that mattered. She learned to ride a gentle horse with Kellan leading, so she could feel the wind in her face. She learned to dance in the kitchen while Kellan hummed, moving together in the small space. She learned to live fully in a world she could not see. Kellan never regretted that day at the Fort Laramie trading post, never once wished he had sent Zara back. She had become the center of his world, the beat of his heart. He told her often that she was beautiful, described the way she looked to her so she would know. He read to her every night, finishing Jane Eyre and moving on to other books. He made sure she knew, every single day, how loved she was. When Kieran was 8 and Carissa was 5, Zara discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first 2 and Kellan worried constantly. But Zara was strong, and in the winter of that year, she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Kyle and Kendra. 4 children, Kellan said, looking at his expanded family with awe. "We have 4 children." "We do," Zara said, exhausted but happy. "And I could not have done any of this without you." "You could have," Kellan said. "You can do anything, but I am glad I got to be here for it." The children grew, and the ranch prospered. Kellan expanded the herd, built a larger barn, added rooms to the house. Zara's garden grew year by year, becoming famous in Fort Laramie for producing the best vegetables in the territory. She taught her daughters to sew and cook, and they in turn learned to describe the world to their mother in vivid detail. Kieran grew tall and strong, learning to work the ranch alongside his father. He had his mother's determination and his father's steady nature. Carissa was quieter, more thoughtful, with a love of books that reminded Kellan of his own mother. The twins were whirlwinds of energy, always getting into mischief, but with good hearts underneath. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Kellan took Zara on a picnic to the creek that ran behind their house. It was a warm summer day, and the children were all at the Daltons for the afternoon. They spread a blanket on the grass and ate the food Zara had prepared, listening to the water burble over the rocks. "You ever regret it?" Kellan asked. "Coming here, marrying me?" Zara turned toward him, her face showing surprise. "Regret it?" "Kellan, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. This life, this family, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. I just think sometimes about that day at the trading post. You were so scared I would send you back. What if I had? But you did not," Zara said. She reached out and found his hand. "You told me to feel your heart instead, and I did. I felt your kindness and your strength, and I knew I wanted to take the chance. I have never regretted it, not for one single moment." Kellan lifted her hand to his lips. "I love you. I have loved you since the beginning, and I will love you until the end." "I love you too," Zara said. "You gave me a life I never thought I could have. You gave me a home and a family and love. You saw me, truly saw me, when everyone else only saw my blindness. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They sat by the creek for hours, talking about their years together, their children, their hopes for the future. The sun moved across the sky and the shadows grew long, and Kellan felt a deep contentment settle into his bones. They returned to the house as the sun was setting, walking hand in hand. The children came home shortly after, full of stories about their day, and the house filled with noise and laughter. Zara moved through it all with ease, knowing by sound and smell and touch where everyone was, what they needed. After the children were in bed, Kellan and Zara sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars were out, brilliant in the clear Wyoming sky. Kellan described them to Zara, painting pictures with words, and she listened with her head on his shoulder. "Tell me about the future," Zara said. "What do you see for us?" "I see us growing old together," Kellan said. "I see our children growing up and starting families of their own. I see us sitting on this porch when we are old and gray, still holding hands, still in love." "That sounds perfect," Zara said softly. "What do you see?" Kellan asked, then caught himself. "I mean, what do you imagine?" "I imagine the same thing," Zara said, "but I also imagine the sounds. Grandchildren laughing, the creek still running behind the house, your voice reading to me when my fingers are too old and stiff to read by touch. I imagine a life full of love and family and home." "We will have that," Kellan promised. "All of it." And they did. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy and love. Their children grew and married and had children of their own. Kieran took over much of the ranch work as Kellan's back began to protest the heavy labor. Carissa married a teacher who came to Fort Laramie and started a school. The twins, inseparable as always, built houses side by side on the far edge of the property. Kellan and Zara became grandparents, and then great-grandparents. Their house was always full of noise and life. Zara learned each grandchild by voice and touch, just as she had learned her own children. She told them stories of coming to Wyoming, of meeting their grandfather, of building a life on the frontier. "Tell us about when Grandpa told you to feel his heart," the children would beg, and Zara would smile and tell the story again, never tiring of it. On the day of their 40th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch. There were dozens of people, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, filling the house and spilling out into the yard. They had a feast, with tables laden with food. There was music and dancing and stories told late into the night. Kellan stood with Zara in the middle of it all, his arm around her waist. Her hair was silver now, and there were lines on her face, but to him she was as beautiful as she had been the day she stepped off that stagecoach. She leaned into him, and he knew she was listening to the sounds of their family, cataloging each voice, each laugh. "Happy?" he asked her. "More than I can say," she said. "You gave me the world, Kellan. You gave me everything." "You gave me the same," he said. "You were my salvation, Zara. You taught me what love really means." They danced that night, moving slowly in the yard while their family watched. The music was soft and the stars were bright, and Kellan held Zara close and thanked whatever fate had brought her to him. "I would do it all again," Zara said, her cheek against his chest. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time." "And I would tell you the same thing," Kellan said. "To feel my heart, because that is where you have always lived." Years later, when they were both old and their bodies had slowed, they still sat on the porch every evening. Kellan would describe the sunset to Zara, and she would listen with the same attention she had given him 45 years before. Their children and grandchildren would visit, and the house would fill with noise and life, but Kellan's favorite moments were these quiet times with Zara, just the two of them and the prairie wind. "You remember the day we met?" Zara asked one evening. "Every detail," Kellan said. "You wore a blue dress. The driver was worried I would send you back. You stood there so brave, telling me you were blind, expecting rejection. And you told me to feel your heart," Zara said, her weathered hand reaching for his. "That was the moment I knew everything would be all right. I could feel your goodness, your honesty. I could feel that you meant what you said. I did mean it. I meant every word I ever said to you." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into evening. The creek still babbled behind the house. The wind still moved through the grass. The horses still whinnied in the corral. Some things never changed. "I want you to know something," Zara said, "in case I have never said it clearly enough. You saved my life, Kellan. Not just by marrying me, but by seeing me as whole when everyone else saw me as broken. You gave me back my dignity and my purpose. You loved me not despite my blindness, but with it as part of who I am. That is a gift beyond measure." Kellan felt his eyes sting with tears. "You saved mine too. I was alone, going through the motions of living but not really alive. You brought light into my world. You taught me that love is not about perfection, it is about acceptance. It is about choosing each other every single day." "We chose well," Zara said with a smile. "We did," Kellan agreed. As the sun set over the Wyoming prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Kellan described it all to Zara one more time. He had done this thousands of times over their decades together, but it never got old. Each sunset was new, each moment precious. "Beautiful," Zara said when he finished. "Not as beautiful as you," Kellan said, and he meant it. They continued on like this for several more years, their love deepening with age rather than fading. When Kellan's health began to fail, Zara was by his side constantly, her hands gentle as she cared for him. When Zara caught pneumonia one harsh winter, Kellan sat by her bed and read to her until his voice was hoarse, refused to leave even when the children urged him to rest. They had built a life together against all odds, a blind woman and a cowboy who had taken a chance on love. They had faced every challenge as partners, raised a family, created a legacy that would last long after they were gone. Their story became legend in Fort Laramie, told to new generations as an example of what love could be. On a spring morning, when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom on the prairie, Kellan and Zara sat together on their porch for the last time. They were both failing now, their bodies worn out from long lives well lived. They held hands, fingers intertwined, and listened to the sounds of the ranch around them. "No regrets?" Kellan asked, his voice thin with age. "Not a single one," Zara said. "We had a good life, didn't we?" "The best life," Kellan agreed. "I love you, Zara. I have loved you from the moment you put your hand on my heart." "And I love you," Zara said. "You were the answer to every prayer I never knew to say." They sat together as the sun rose higher, warming their faces. The creek babbled its eternal song. The wind moved through the grass, and somewhere in the distance, their great-grandchildren were laughing. It was a perfect morning on the Wyoming prairie, and Kellan and Zara faced it together as they had faced everything, hand in hand and heart to heart. Their children found them there hours later, still sitting together, still holding hands. They had passed peacefully within moments of each other, neither wanting to go on without the other. It was fitting, the family agreed, that they should leave this world as they had lived in it together. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains and the prairie. The whole community came to the funeral, drawn by the story of their love, the example they had set. The preacher spoke of partnership and devotion, of two people who had built something beautiful out of what others might have seen as an impossible situation. Kieran, now an old man himself, spoke at the service. "My father once told me that when he met my mother, he told her to feel his heart instead of worrying about what she could see. That was the defining moment of their relationship and of our family. They taught us that love is not about perfection. It is about acceptance, about seeing the whole person and choosing them anyway. They taught us that challenges are just opportunities to love harder, to be more creative, to build something stronger. That is the legacy they left us." The family placed wildflowers on the graves, the same kind that grew all over the prairie. Yellow and purple and pink, they brightened the hillside and would return every spring as a reminder of the love that had bloomed there. In the years that followed, the Pierce Ranch continued to thrive under the care of Kellan and Zara's descendants. The house was preserved, kept much as it had been when Kellan and Zara had lived there. Visitors would come to see it, drawn by the story of the blind woman and the cowboy who had fallen in love in the Wild West. The trading post in Fort Laramie put up a plaque commemorating their story. It told of the day in 1878 when Zara Keller had arrived, of Kellan Pierce's acceptance, of the life they had built together. It became a symbol for the town, a reminder that love could overcome any obstacle. Their letters to each other, the ones they had exchanged before Zara came west, were donated to the Wyoming State Archives. They became required reading in local schools, an example of authentic frontier correspondence and a beautiful love story. Students would read Zara's careful descriptions of her life and her hopes, Kellan's honest responses, and understand that real love was built on honesty and acceptance. The creek that ran behind the house became known as Pierce Creek, and families would picnic there in the summer, telling their children the story of Kellan and Zara. The barn that Kellan had built with his own hands stood for over 100 years before it finally had to be replaced, and when it was, The new owners used some of the original timber as a tribute. Carissa, who had become a teacher, wrote a book about her parents' lives. It was published to great acclaim, read across the country as an example of frontier life and enduring love. She included her mother's words about learning to parent without sight, her father's descriptions of the prairie, the small moments that had made up their life together. The book ended with the story of their last morning, sitting together on the porch, and Carissa's final words were these: "My parents taught me that love is not about seeing someone with your eyes. It is about seeing them with your heart." My father understood this from the very beginning, when he told my mother to feel his heart instead of worrying about her blindness. That moment defined not just their relationship, but our entire family. We all learn to see with our hearts, to value people for who they are rather than what they can do. That is my parents' true legacy, and it lives on in every one of their descendants. The Pierce family continued to grow, spreading across Wyoming and beyond. But they always came back to the ranch, to the house where it had all started, to the porch where Kellan had read to Zara for decades, to the creek that had been the soundtrack of their lives. They would sit there and tell stories about the blind woman and the cowboy, keeping the memory alive for new generations. And on quiet evenings, when the wind moved through the prairie grass and the creek babbled in the background, some said you could still feel their presence. A sense of peace, of enduring love, of two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something that would last forever. The story of Kellan and Zara Pierce became more than just family history. It became a symbol of hope for anyone who felt broken or incomplete. It showed that love could bridge any gap, overcome any obstacle. It proved that what seemed like a disadvantage could become a strength when met with acceptance and creativity. Young couples getting married would visit the graves on the hill, asking for a blessing on their own marriages. People facing challenges would think of Zara, learning to parent without sight, running a household on the frontier, living fully despite her blindness. They would think of Kellan, who had seen past the surface to the woman beneath, who had loved with his whole heart without reservation. The house became a museum eventually, preserved exactly as it had been. Visitors could see the kitchen where Zara had cooked, the shelves where Kellan had kept her books, the porch where they had spent countless evenings together. They could walk down to the creek and imagine what it had been like, this life built on love and determination. And always, the story came back to that first moment. To Zara standing in the doorway of the stagecoach, brave and terrified, saying, "I'm blind, sir, they forgot to tell you." To Kellan's response, immediate and sure, "Then feel my heart instead." Those words became famous, quoted at weddings and written in letters, a perfect encapsulation of what love should be. The Pierce family made sure the story was never forgotten. They held reunions at the ranch every year, gathering from across the country to remember their ancestors and celebrate the love that had started it all. Children who had never known Kellan and Zara heard the stories and felt connected to them, inspired by their example. On the 100th anniversary of Kellan and Zara's meeting, the family held a special celebration. Hundreds of descendants gathered, along with historians and writers and people who had simply been touched by the story. They recreated the moment of their meeting, with 2 actors playing the parts, and there was not a dry eye in the crowd when the actor playing Kellan said those famous words, "Then feel my heart instead." The celebration lasted 3 days, with storytelling and music and dancing. The family shared their favorite memories, their own stories of love and challenge overcome. They talked about the lessons Kellan and Zara had taught, about seeing people as whole rather than focusing on their limitations, about the power of acceptance and determination. As the sun set on the final day of the celebration, the entire family gathered on the hill where Kellan and Zara were buried. They formed a circle around the graves, holding hands, and sang hymns that Kellan and Zara had loved. The wind moved through the prairie grass, the creek babbled in the distance, and the mountains stood purple against the darkening sky. It was perfect, just as Kellan and Zara's life together had been perfect. Not without challenge or hardship, but perfect in the ways that mattered. Perfect in love, in commitment, in the family they had created and the legacy they had left. As the stars began to come out, filling the vast Wyoming sky with light, the family dispersed slowly. But they carried Kellan and Zara with them, in their hearts and their memories and their determination to love as fully and completely as their ancestors had loved. The story of the blind woman and the cowboy would live on, passed down through generations, inspiring people to look past the surface, to feel with their hearts instead of relying only on their eyes. It would remind people that love is a choice, made new each day, and that the strongest loves are built on acceptance and understanding. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Kellan and Zara were together still. He was describing sunsets to her, reading her favorite books aloud, holding her hand and telling her she was beautiful. She was listening to his heartbeat, feeling his love through his touch, living fully and completely in a way that transcended sight. Their love had been extraordinary, but it had also been simple. It had been built on small moments, quiet conversations, hands held on a porch at sunset. It had been built on choosing each other, every single day, through every challenge and every joy. That was the real story, the one that mattered. Not the dramatic moment of their meeting, though that was important. Not the challenges they had overcome, though those showed their strength. The real story was in the daily choice to love, to see each other truly, to build a life together one moment at a time. And that story, the story of Kellan and Zara Pierce, would never end. It would live on in every descendant who chose love over fear, in every person who learned to see with their heart instead of just their eyes, in every couple who faced challenges together with courage and commitment. The prairie wind would carry it across Wyoming, the creek would sing it in its eternal babble, the mountains would stand as silent witnesses to a love that had conquered all obstacles. And somewhere, two souls would be together still, bound by a love that had begun with a simple invitation. Then feel my heart instead. And she had, and in feeling his heart she had found her home,